Hello, everyone. It's time for another magical IntiCreates sprite game. Hashtag not an ad. We got this from them. It's Blaster Master 02 for the Switch. Yay!
Honestly, I wish that we had known about this sooner because I bought the game before we got codes for it. So, not that I feel
Yeah,
bad
that
about
was
paying
it.
for it. It's just one of those things like, God damn it, I just spent money on this.
Yeah, it was a shadow drop.
Yeah, it came out the day of that Nintendo Indie
The Nindies.
presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Blaster Master Zero One. Oh God, we're getting Mega Man all over in this.
Yep.
That came out like right as the Switch launched, if I remember correctly. Like maybe
More or less.
I don't
Yeah.
remember if it was day one or not, but it was pretty early. I didn't play that game until like a month ago, so it was a nice coincidence that this came out like right when it did because like the first game was still fresh in my mind, and the game was just announced as complete, if that makes sense. Like there wasn't any previews for this as far as I know, like at all. It was
Nope.
just like
Just came out.
this game exists. Here it is. Let's go. Now,
Go buy it.
did you play the original, like the NES one, at all, or?
I was aware of it. I have never actually played it.
That was kind of the same thing for me as well. Like I know the music. The music for the original NES game was really good, and I tried it because it's on the Switch NES downloads thing. But like I was playing it, and while it was fine on NES, I was thinking, man, some of this stuff's clunky. I
Yeah.
understand why they basically remade it because from what I've seen, Zero One is I don't.
Basically just a remake of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a. From what I can tell, it's kind of like a Zero Mission Metroid kind of reimagining of it. I don't
Yeah.
know. The first area in particular is very close to the original game. I don't know about
Hmm.
later levels, but this is like all new. And from what I've played, I haven't beaten this game. I've gotten, I think, about halfway through. This game is an improvement on Zero One in almost every way, I would personally say.
Oh,
Like,
that's good to hear. I mean, I have which is good because Zero One has a lot of relatively minor nitpicky stuff for me, except for one problem I wish they would just get rid of entirely. But
what was that for Zero One?
and it's in here too that sometimes Jason takes one damage from falls, and if you go like one
Oh,
pixel longer than that, he just dies.
oh yeah, no, his. Whenever you are doing the platforming
Platforming
with
is
him
Jason.
outside the tank, it's super finicky and dangerous. Which I
Yeah,
suppose is the point is that you're not in your tank, so you're probably gonna die. But it does make some stuff really finicky. Like later on in the game, like in the third or fourth area, there's the planetoids that hover around each of the main planets with all the little challenges. One of them is a Jason only platforming section where you have to jump off of ladders onto other ladders, and if you make one mistake, you basically die, and then you have to
and
do the
climbing
whole
on
thing.
ladders in this. Yeah, climbing on ladders in this game in both one and two are not very well done.
Yeah, and you also have to go all the way back too, because for some reason Fred the frog won't let you teleport back in that situation, even though you picked up the power up. But whatever, it's a minor thing. In almost
Yeah, that's the only gameplay problem I really have with these games. The rest is quite good.
Oh no, I really enjoy it. Like for one thing, Inti creates they just do really good sprite work, you know? Like
Yeah,
I mean granted it is obviously an 8-bit style, which I know that a lot of people are
are
kind
tired
of
of.
tired of, but the thing that always impresses me about Inti creates whenever they're animating something like the Blaster Master games or Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is that the detail and the fluidity of the sprites make it clear that okay, this isn't just an 8-bit game that's trying to look like an NES game. It's a modern, really well animated sprite game that's just using an 8-bit aesthetic, which is a subtle but important difference to me
Yeah,
specifically.
especially it's one of those times where it also makes sense to do it this way because Blaster Master is an NES game.
Yeah,
If you're doing something in its style, it makes sense to keep the visual identity of the series.
but also I think that it's just an evolution and an improvement because if you go back and look at the original game, the color palette's actually pretty muted. And this game
Yeah.
pops a lot more. So it looks, even though it is using still an 8-bit kind of tone, it looks nothing like the original on a bigger scale, I would say.
Yep.
So I really do like that. I also, in general, really like the new weapons and options that the tank gets in this game. You unlock the hover in the first area.
Yes.
Okay.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
Mind you, that's not a big deal in 1 because if you're getting 100%, there's only one thing you're missing. There's only one thing you're going to be missing in terms of getting 100%, and before you get the hover, it's not a big deal because you have to backtrack that way anyway.
Yeah. Did you beat 0, 100% with the true
Yes.
ending and all that? Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
I really liked 0, 1, even though it did have some nitpicky things. One thing that I really like about this game, though, is that you're more incentivized to use the cooler stuff that the tank has because you have an easier way to recharge your SP, and the levels are designed around this like high drop system where many of the abilities you get will allow you to easily gain altitude, so you can crash back down and quickly refill your
Yep.
SP and use your
They
stronger
also-
guns.
Yeah, they also gave you the hover in the first area specifically, so you can just basically do that wherever you want.
Yeah, that is true, but I also really like the abilities that they give you. One thing that I also like about this game in general is that this game has a lot of different abilities than the first game. So, like in the original game, you could eventually like crawl up walls, and in this game, in the second area, you get the ability to do a wall jump with the tank instead, which is it fulfills a similar role, but it's faster and more fun in that way. And I feel like it's good in the sense that you feel like you're playing a sequel and not like a retread, if that makes sense. Because
Samus, you need to get your morph ball back again.
yeah, that's Metroids is actually the first thing that comes to mind. Is that there's very few brand new abilities in most of the 2D Metroid games. It's all like, okay, you get your beams, you get your morph ball, you get your missiles, and you don't feel like you're traversing the world in a completely different way each time. It's just like, and in this game, it's like, okay, I feel like I'm moving through the game differently, and it makes the game feel more distinct.
I mean, that's kind of interesting thing because OG Master Blast was basically a better Metroid game before Metroid was.
Yeah, that's true. It does have a lot of Metroid elements in it as well.
It's weird. It's just that Blaster Master NES more or less just feels like it's way ahead of its time, and that kind of confused a lot of people.
Yeah, that's very true. Like, I mean, it's weird because it's ahead of its time, but you also have to remember that it's still an NES game, which makes some things a little bit hard to go back to.
It's only got 2 buttons.
It's only got 2. That I think is the big problem with the original game, is that it's only got 2 buttons, so you have to do, like, I think it's down and B to do the special weapons, which is awkward. Yeah. And yep. I do think they make a comment about how he can't save the world if he has broken kneecaps or something like that. So the dialogue in this game I do think is charming as well.
This 1 and 0, 1 and 0, 2 are a bit tropey, but they have charm.
Yeah, they're I think this one kind of feels a little bit more tropey because there's more characters in it, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's entertaining enough, I guess is the best way to put it. So the overhead sections, how do you feel about these in general compared to the tank parts?
I generally prefer the tank, mostly because I'm a side-scrolling platformer kind of guy with a little bit of Metroid mixed in. This isn't bad, it's just sometimes it can be a bit awkward on depth perception.
I understand what you're talking about with the with the floating rock there. Yeah,
it's really hard to tell where Jason's hitbox starts and ends, and for other things as well, because think of it a little bit like Toho, where your hitbox is much smaller than your sprite.
Yeah, like something can zoom over your head and you won't necessarily
get hit
die
by it.
So one thing about the overworld in this game that I do like is that more of your weapons are useful than in the original game. Where in the original game, also the frog being able to just instantly teleport you out of an area once you found all the stuff. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, it
Because
did that in 0-1, but only if it was like an actual item. If it was the map or something else, you couldn't do that for some bizarre reason. So I'm glad
yes,
they changed that.
yeah, so you can more consistently warp out of areas now, which I appreciate. But one thing that I like about this game is that the weapons you get, there's more of a reason to use all of them. Whereas in the original, it kind of felt like once you got the wave beam like ability, you just used that until and nothing else, because none of the other abilities in that were anywhere near as good as the wave.
You mean for the tank or for the
For the overhead sections. The tank
Yeah.
was better about having everything be useful, but in the overhead
Yeah.
sections, the best gun was just the best gun. And
Yeah,
once
I found some uses for the flamethrower, but if it wasn't the flamethrower, it was always the wave beam gun. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the flamethrower did have some specific use, but the wave beam gun, it kind of felt like if I had the wave beam gun, I never lost it because it was so good.
Yeah. Well, once you got the 1 damage buffer.
Oh yeah, for sure. That made it.
Yeah, because I think they wanted to emphasize more getting the power-ups for the gun were your power-ups. So it was trying to keep you in charge of not getting hit, or rewarding you for getting better, even though if you have the better gun, you're just not likely to get hit anyway.
Yeah. And one thing that I do like about 0-2 as well is that you'll eventually unlock elemental sub-weapons, and if you combine them with certain gun levels, you'll get different things. Like the charge gun, for example, with the fire, will get a fire explosion if you charge it up to max and stuff like that. And so,
I mean, I also showed earlier the you have a shortcut menu for different weapons, so you don't have to kind of pause the action, switch to the the flamethrower or whatever. You can have the wave beam gun equipped, but if you find, oh, I need to melt the ice, hold ZR and you're using your flamethrower.
you can do that with the gun too, with the tank too, which I find is very helpful because I like to have the you eventually get kind of like a screen nuke type attack and like a dash attack for the tank, and I just like to have those kinds of things on hand at all times. So I just keep those on the quick access keys. And when I'm using the gun, like as Jason, I prefer to have the reflector on hand at all times, just because that's one of, having a defensive option is always a good thing.
I honestly always forget I have the reflector even in 0-1, because if I'm not using if I'm getting hit enough to where I don't have the wave beam gun, I'm just kind of screwed regardless.
Yeah, that's true. So actually, one thing about this game that they don't really explain super well is that when you're Jason, you have a dodge move now when you press the X button on.
Oh, you do?
On Switch, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So you actually can get different upgrades for it. So sometimes the enemies in the overhead sections will have little crosshairs over them, and when you see that and you press the X button, you'll do like a little dodge out of the way matrix kind of thing. And then Jason will do a more powerful shot aimed directly at that enemy. And you can get different kinds of dodges as well. Like one is a dodge that if you don't have any enemies around, it'll just allow you to dash so you can move faster. So that's the one I usually have on. And if the enemy does allow itself to be countered, you kind of dash forward towards it and do more damage. But obviously that's kind of a more high risk, high reward sort of one. And then there's one that just reflects all projectiles around you.
Yeah, so he basically becomes Bayonetta.
I mean, yeah, pretty much. Although, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm glad they're giving you more options, because I felt 0-1, while still, like I said, it's a very good game, it has some weird limitations to it.
Yeah, it's one thing that, like, when I was playing 0-1, I didn't even know you could strafe, which made the overhead sections a lot harder when I was playing it. But if you hold down like the L button, you can change the buttons to be whatever you want. Although it's incredibly minor nitpick, the game reverts back to the default controls every time you close the software. So you have to remember to change it back every time you turn it on. Because I like to have the diagonal be the L button for the tank just because that's what it was in Metroid Fusion. So that's my muscle memory. And having it be on R is just weird for me.
R is totally fine for me, so.
Yeah, but again, that's just that's a minor nitpick. As long as you just remember to change it back every time you turn the game on, you're pretty much okay. But yeah, so one thing that I do like about this game is that the structure, I think, has generally been improved. So, although I can understand if some people wouldn't really like this, because the game doesn't really have a large interconnected world anymore, and instead it's more kind of stage-based, if that makes sense. Like, you have one planet, and then once you unlock the next planet, you can then go there, and so on and so forth. So it's closer to Metroid Fusion than Super Metroid. But I don't mind that, because for one thing, it means that there's less backtracking in this game than there was in the original. Because in the original, there were a couple of times when you were just going through an area and not much had changed.
It only does that twice, and it's not a huge deal because aside from like one health pickup, you can get everything on your first run through for an area.
Yeah, usually.
So even when you're backtracking, it's just kind of a quick run through rather than, okay, now I'm back in the area I was just in, time to use my new power-ups to scour the 1/3 of it I couldn't before.
Yeah, so it's not a major problem, but it's just I like it just because I can get to any area I want from the hub a little bit more easily.
Yeah, instead of having to go through
it's just
2
like
to get through 4 and all
yeah,
that.
it's just like I can get from Area 1 to Area 5 as quickly as getting from Area 1 to Area 2, pretty much. And you also get to fly the spaceship in space, which is fun. So, you know, I enjoy it for that reason as well. So, you know, that's always good. But yeah, it's just one thing that I also think is just generally better about this game is I think that the difficulty balance is a little bit tighter as well. Like, I think that this game in general is harder than the original, but it's also less BS in certain points as well, which is an interesting kind of take. Like, I've fought a good number of the bosses so far, and while none of them were too hard that I couldn't handle them, none of them felt like they were kind of BS either. So, so that's what I was talking about right now. You see the crosshairs over that guy. Yeah. If you press X, you'll do like a matrix dodge out of the way and shoot the button, and then shoot that guy. And then
good to know when I get back to this game.
Yeah. You also can don't know that you can change your weapons yet, I notice, because you're still using the dinky little gun, and you have almost the best gun by this point.
Well, because that was a thing. That was a problem I had with 01. Because I did not care for basically any of the other weapons, besides the wave beam gun.
So like
I kind of just forgot the rest of them were there and was just waiting to get the max one. And by the time I get the max one, I kind of forgot about it entirely. Like, I could switch to it right here, but then I'm like, oh, I'm at the boss, hooray!
Well, one thing
reminder, I'm also recording my first run through of this for the sake of the impressions video, so
yeah,
I'm kind of trying to figure out 30 things at once.
One thing that I think it's a little bit easier to forget, though, because you kind of come with the long beam intact, where if I remember correctly in 01, your default shots only went like 5 feet in front of you, so it was very easy it's like, since you have a functioning gun at the beginning, it's easy to forget that,
you have other stuff.
It's like, there's better guns out there. So, yeah. But yeah, you'd probably...
Well, that, and I'm kind of assuming I'm going to get hit, so I'm not even bothering trying to get used to other weapons.
Yeah, but that's, I think, one thing that they added the dodge maneuver for, is that it was very easy to get hit in 01.
See, I'm using what I have now, and then I kind of swap back.
I do like the spread shot gun. I feel like isn't as good as it could be. I'm not sure if it'll combine with something else later in the game, because again, I'm only about halfway through it myself at this point.
Yeah.
But I feel like it runs out of gas a little bit too slowly. if that makes sense. Like it'll, because one thing about the best gun in this game is that if you shoot it too much, it'll get weaker and weaker and weaker. So you're not supposed to just spam the best gun. But that also applies to the spread shotgun. You can get a little bit earlier on as well, and I feel like the spread shotgun needs a little bit more time at its full power mode. That's just a nitpick, but you know.
Right. Now this is our first boss, Makrantula.
It shoots spider. Oh, you did it by accident.
Yeah. I was wondering what that was.
Yeah, it's just like I like the anime swooshy lines you get whenever you do it.
Oh, these games are very anime.
Oh yeah, they're
Which is funny because he's named Jason.
Jason. There we go. So now you have
Try hovering.
You got that at the very end of the original game, didn't you?
The hover?
Yeah. Or
No, you
in,
got
like,
that.
the
You got
middle.
that after Area 3.
Okay, yeah. So you get it much earlier in this one because
Because it's designed around you stomping the ground to refill your SP, so it makes
Yeah.
sense to put this like to be the first thing, so you can, if nothing else, you can kind of grind SP if you really need to.
yeah, pretty much.
Otherwise, if you couldn't, you were in a tough position, you'd be kind of boned.
You can, if you run out of SP, you will eventually refill it, like your tank, but your tank will go gray and be in a weakened state until then. So sometimes, if it seems faster, I'll just use all my SP by spamming missiles and then go back up to full that way as well. So yeah. But
the game
yeah,
is the game as long as 0-1 is good about telling you, okay, there's nothing else we can get here, let's go back.
yeah, that as well. And also the one thing I do appreciate about this game as well is that everything on the map is very clearly marked. This was a thing in 0-1. Just like if there's still a boss to fight in a sub area, the game will list. And one thing that I also appreciate that I don't think was in the original is that on the overworld map, the game will tell you what items are still left to find in that area. So if you don't
0-1 would tell you there's an item in a cave, or if there's a health pickup to get, but it will not tell you what it is.
Yeah, but it's like you can see at a glance how many power-ups you missed in like Planet 1, Planet 2, and so on and so forth. Which I don't think that there was any way to tell like how many things you had missed overall in the residential zone at all.
No, you couldn't change the area map at all in 0-1.
Yeah, so I definitely appreciate that in this game a lot. So it's I think that's just straight up an improvement.
Yeah, because I'm great now, and it's refilling SP on its own.
Yeah. You can't refill SP just by jumping the tank's normal height, though.
Unfortunately.
Which, that would be a little broken, but...
A little bit, but at the same time, it feels like you're just kind of waiting at that point, but it's hardly a big deal.
I think your SP will go back to normal if you enter the cave and then leave, but don't quote me on that one. So
I'm not sure. It didn't in 0-1.
Yeah. Yeah, but... Yeah, it didn't in 0-1, so I guess there's no reason to think about it in 0-2. One thing that you're not really going to see it here because we're in the first area, I also like the area variety a lot more in 0-2 than in 0-1. Because in 0-1, some of the areas kind of felt a little bit samey in terms of theme, but each of the areas in this game is much more distinct. I also think the music's better in this game, too. Not that the music in 0-1 was bad. A lot of songs were actually very good. But I think that the general variety is better in this game overall. Like, especially the second planet, I think has phenomenal music. So,
That's something to look forward to.
Yeah. Like, my favorite songs in the original game were, like, the opening area theme and one of the very late game dungeon themes. I really like. I can't tell you their names off the top of my head, but I really liked those. And I'm enjoying almost every theme in this game about as much as I liked those two. So, that's
good.
Yeah. There's just a lot to enjoy about this, and I'm glad I picked it up. One thing that this isn't the game's fault, but I wish that my Joy-Con hadn't started doing the control stick drifting problem because
you're gonna have to get a new one then.
Yeah, because I like playing this kind of game handheld, and trying to play a game like this when your controller just randomly decides, oh, you're pointing up now, right? It's infuriating. It's practically impossible in some situations. So, that's that's a me problem, not the game
Game problem.
problem. So, but
And,
yeah,
and one thing I always appreciate about IntiCreates games is that they're cheap and they're short, and they're relatively short.
well, this game's actually I find it's a good bit longer than the first one. Like,
Really,
because
because I finished. Sorry, go on.
How long did it take you to finish the first game?
100%, 6.5 hours.
Yeah,
Mind you, I play a ton of these kinds of games in my life, so I kind of know what I'm doing. Where I can I can walk into a room and say, "Oh, there's a save point on a narrow corridor. This must be the way forward. Let's go back and try the other areas."
Yeah, pretty much. I'd say that I'm at like 4 or 5, and I still probably have another 2 planets at least to go. And there's probably an endgame twist or something like that for 100%, because that's how it was in 0-1. So
Yeah.
I think that this game is probably at least an hour or so longer than the original, give or
Oh.
take.
Yeah. Well, helps that they're reusing a lot of basic stuff.
Yeah. One thing that I'm really interested though is if we're gonna get DLC for this game, because the original game did have DLC for
Yeah,
a bunch
4
of
extra characters.
yeah. And what's funny is that they reference some of them in the dialogue. Like,
Oh, really?
there's a line about the whip attack that you can get with Jason, and they're just like, "Don't we know a girl who uses her hair to do something like that?" And they're like, "Wait, do we?" So I find that cute. I find that cute.
Speaking of Shantae 5.
Oh my gosh, well, that's another video, but
Yes.
that's a great announcement.
Anyway, yeah. Since I got this for more or less free from IntiCreates, I went and bought the DLC just to kind of make up for that.
Well, hopefully they do something like they did for the original game, where if you had bought the game early enough, the DLC came free. Like, if you bought the
really?
game day 1 or whatever, you got all the, I think as long as you like logged in and downloaded it in time, you got the DLC like 100% free. So
Oh, very nice.
I don't know if we'll get third-party people again, but there are other characters in this game that drive their own tanks. So I feel like if they're not...
That could be a good replacement.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also like the third-party stuff too, but...
I mean, what could be interesting is, depending on how characters interact with the story, especially by the end, they could have, DLC side story missions.
That would be cool, yeah. The one thing that I just hope for, though, in general, for DLC, if they do it, is that I want their tanks to have different abilities. Because in 0-1, while the characters in these overhead sections, and when you were out of the tank, played differently, they were pretty much the same as Jason when you were inside the tank, which is half the game. So half the game was basically the same whenever you were playing a DLC character, which was fine because the tank gameplay is fun, but I kind of wanted the DLC to change the whole experience and not just half of it. So
Right.
I'm hoping that if they do DLC, the tanks get their own movesets on top of the overhead sections getting their own movesets. So we'll see if that happens. I hope it does.
I mean, for what is this, $10 still?
Yeah, this is $10. It's
Yeah,
definitely
so
worth the
yeah.
price for sure.
I'll take a $10 6 to 8 hour game anytime.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Especially since these games are also pretty replayable as well. Like the original game, if you 100%ed it, you got a really good New Game Plus
Yeah,
style
you got New Game
mode.
Plus, you got a hard mode.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a lot of room to do similar stuff with this as well. Like, I'm sure that there are already people speedrunning it, even though this game's like a week old at the time of this recording. So,
Possibly.
yeah, no, I'm sure, because somebody will upload their first playthrough to speed demos and be like, "Look, this is world record," and you're like, "Technically true." Yeah, that is indeed the fastest time somebody has beaten that game.
So far.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the sub-weapons you get in this game I also like a little bit more than the ones you got in the original as well, because...
Well, the original, you just had grenade, place grenade, different kind of grenade, and then screen nuke.
Yeah, whereas in this game you get stuff like, if you do a counter, it'll be a shield and stuff like that, and there's the different elemental varieties and stuff. So the sub-weapons, I just think in general, are better in this one than they were in the original. It's just an improvement all around, I think. And since 0-1 was already a pretty good game, that just means that this is... I'm really glad that IntiCreates has been so solid as well, because they've been making
No,
Like,
they've been very reliable as a studio.
yeah, because like Gunvolt really isn't my thing, but they definitely are well-made
Yeah.
games.
No, they're still very good games.
This was good. Bloodstained was really, really good.
Mega Man 9 and 10.
Yeah, they were working on they did some stuff for Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. I think it might have just been some art, but still,
Yeah.
you know. Like, the studio definitely does do consistent work, and I'm glad that the trend continued. Oh, literally free life up there. Nice.
Well, there's always one or two in these types of games just to make sure you have health.
Yeah, they're generally easier to find in this one than the original, I've kind of found.
The original weren't too bad, except for that one that was just inside of a cave for some reason.
Oh yeah, that was a little bizarre. But anyway, yeah, get this game. It's good.
Yeah, it's very good. I highly recommend it. And thanks IntiCreates for giving us a code for it.
Yeah.